Welcome to Psyche Talks. Today, we're diving into something fundamental, something that shapes, well, pretty much everything. Communication.
That's right.
We're setting out on a deep dive into its transformative power. Our mission, really, is to get past the usual tips and tricks. We want to understand how mastering this isn't just about, swapping information.
Not at all. It's about connection.
Exactly. Forging real connections, building understanding, and ultimately unlocking greater success and well-being. We've pulled insights from a pretty comprehensive guide, hoping for some real aha moments for you.
And that's spot on, because this isn't just about, say, writing the perfect email or nailing a presentation, although those things matter.
Sure.
But what's truly fascinating, what this guide explores, is how communication really at its heart is about connecting, human to human.
Yeah.
Fostering that understanding, navigating all the challenges life throws at us, but with clarity, with confidence. So yeah, we'll be looking at the words, sure, but also the things not said. The nonverbal stuff, empathetic listening, even how we handle all this in the digital world. ###stag-I, the foundational power of communication.
Okay, let's dig into that foundation. I had this moment years ago, really crystallized it for me, not in some workshop, but late one night talking with my best friend.
Those late night talks.
Right. And she was going through something really tough, really personal. And as she was talking, laying it all out, I wasn't just hearing the words.
You were feeling the connection.
I was feeling the trust, the sheer trust that good communication builds. She felt safe enough, to be completely vulnerable.
And that safety doesn't just appear.
No, it was built on years of talking, honestly, consistently. It makes you realize every important relationship you have, it's built on countless tiny interactions.
Like bricks in a wall.
Exactly. Each one a brick in that foundation of trust and empathy.
And that foundational piece, that's what really fuels growth, both personally and professionally. I remember early in my career, I thought I had good ideas, but I struggled to get them across confidently.
Yeah, that's common.
And I'd see colleagues, maybe not the ones with the flashiest ideas, but they were thriving. Why? Because they could express themselves clearly, confidently.
It wasn't about being the loudest then.
Not at all. It was about learning to really listen, understand different viewpoints, and then present my own ideas in a way that, that landed. That brought people on board.
Made sense to them.
Right. And making that shift, being intentional about communication.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about being heard. It genuinely opened doors, created opportunities that wouldn't have had otherwise.
And it goes deeper than just careers, right? There's a huge link to well-being, to mental health, that therapeutic power of speaking, and maybe just as importantly, being truly heard.
Absolute fundamental.
I remember a time when I felt pretty isolated, really hesitant, but I joined a local support group.
That takes courage.
It did. And that first meeting, it was, wow, a revelation. Not because I found instant answers.
No, it's rarely about quick fixes.
Exactly. It was the feeling of this immense weight just lifting. Simply being able to share what I was going through in a space where no one judged. And hearing others, those feelings I thought only I had, it just hammered home how finding your voice and being genuinely heard builds this incredible sense of community. Connection.
It really does. My own path to getting better at this, well, it wasn't a smooth climb. More like stumbling through a field of misunderstandings.
Oh, tell me more.
I had this massive argument once with a really close friend over something completely ridiculous in hindsight.
We've all been there.
Yeah, but it escalated badly. We didn't speak for weeks. And looking back, the failure wasn't just what I said. He was my almost like pathological inability to listen.
You were just waiting to talk.
Totally. Interrupting, forming my counter-argument while they were still talking. That fallout, though painful, was such a necessary lesson.
A wake-up call.
A huge one. It forced me to see communication not as some talent you're born with, but as a skill. A complex one that needs conscious effort. Cultivation.
Okay, so that's the turning point. This is where it gets interesting, the how. For me, the first step was just watching people who were good at it.
Observing.
Yeah.
Learning by example.
Yeah. And I noticed their presence, how they seemed genuinely curious about the other person.
Right.
And I started trying to fight that urge. The one where you're planning your response while they're still mid-sentence.
That internal monologue, it's loud.
So loud. So I worked on creating this mental white space, just trying to understand first. Then came the whole nonverbal thing.
Ah, the unspoken language.
Right. Realizing how often my body tense shoulders, folded arms was basically shouting a different message than my words. So consciously trying to use open postures, better eye contact, even little things like nodding.
Mirroring sometimes.
Yeah, subtly. It taps into something primal, that unconscious mimicry, creates this feeling of connection, of safety, almost below the surface, and then the game changer.
I statements.
Huge. Absolutely huge.
Saying, I feel concerned when, instead of you always. It just shifts the whole conversation away from blame.
Towards finding a solution together.
Exactly. And asking open-ended questions. Not just gathering facts, but trying to understand the why behind things. That genuine curiosity became like my compass. #2, mastering the unspoken and unheard. You know, when I first started doing any kind of public speaking, I honestly thought if my words were good, if the logic was sound, that was it. Job done.
A common misconception.
Oh, totally. It took quite a few talks falling flat, seeing those glazed over eyes, to realize words are just part of it. I remember presenting to this small team. My points were solid, I knew they were, but I felt this invisible wall.
Disengagement.
Yeah. And then it hit me. My arms were clamped across my chest. I was probably standing really stiffly. I was broadcasting closed off. The second I consciously made myself relax, open my posture, use some gestures, make real eye contact.
You saw it change. Instantly. People leaned in, their faces changed. It was such a stark lesson. Your body is talking long before your mouth opens.
It's incredibly powerful, isn't it? Nonverbal cues often shape how people perceive you, your credibility, even your trustworthiness, sometimes more than the actual words you use.
Right.
Think about watching a debate.
Yeah.
You might have two people with equally strong arguments.
Okay.
But the one who stays calm, uses open hand movements, maybe nods thoughtfully while listening, they just seem more credible, more trustworthy.
Even if their argument isn't technically better.
Sometimes, yes. And it's fascinating how tiny shifts can make interactions memorable. Like telling a joke deadpan might work, or it might bomb.
True.
But add a little wink, a raised eyebrow, suddenly it connects. It adds that layer of shared feeling that nuanced words alone just can't capture.
And speaking of nuances, what about those expressions that flash across our faces? Micro-expressions.
Yes, the fleeting tells.
They're involuntary, right? Like revealing what someone really feels before they can put their poker face on.
Exactly. They're glitches in the emotional filter.
So you might catch a flicker of skepticism during a pitch, even if they're nodding politely.
Precisely. Or a flash of relief when a sensitive topic is skipped. It's a raw, unfiltered glimpse.
I used to think reading faces was just intuition, something you either have or you don't.
But it's a skill you can develop.
Yeah. I've learned it takes practice. Like, consciously observing, but without judging. Just noticing the tiny movements around the eyes, the mouth, the set of the jaw.
And so much communication is unspoken. I remember a friend insisting, I'm fine, really. But everything else, the little furrow in her brow, the slight lip tension, was practically yelling, I am not okay.
Yeah, the signals contradict the words.
Completely. And just as vital as what we see is what we hear. Not the words, but the music behind them, the tone, the pitch.
Oh, definitely.
A bright, enthusiastic pitch often signals good news, right? While a flat, monotone voice can suggest bad news, or maybe just boredom.
It conveys so much emotion.
Absolutely. In a work context, a confident, steady tone builds credibility. A hesitant, shaky voice, it can unfortunately undermine trust, lead to doubts.
Yeah.
I saw a manager once whose pitch went up slightly. Rhythm got faster when announcing a tight deadline. It instantly conveyed urgency without explicitly saying panic.
Right.
Conversely, I saw a leader whose calm, measured tone during a crisis was incredibly reassuring to the whole team.
It's had the emotional temperature. I remember as a kid, my mom could soothe the biggest tantrum just by shifting to the soft, gentle tone. It wasn't what she said. It was the sound, that feeling of safety it created.
And melody matters.
It really does. You know, a practical tip I found useful? Recording yourself.
Oh, how so?
Just record yourself talking, tell a story, read something out loud, then listen back, paying attention only to the tone, pitch, pace.
Yeah.
It's surprising what you notice about how your own voice impacts the message.
That's a great exercise. And all this brings us to something truly foundational. Empathetic listening.
Which is more than just not talking.
So much more. It's not just hearing words passively. It's about being fully present. Creating that white space we mentioned, tuning in with your heart and your mind, not just your ears.
I had a real aha moment with this. I was with a friend, Mark, in a cafe. He was sharing something important, a real struggle.
Okay.
And I confess, my mind was partly on my phone buzzing, partly thinking about what I would say next, what advice I could give.
We've all done it, the fix-it mode.
Totally. And eventually, Mark just stopped talking. The silence was awkward. He looked at me, not angry, but sort of disappointed.
Ouch.
Big ouch. That was it for me. Realizing active listening isn't about data gathering. It's about validating their feelings, their experience. It builds that deeper bond.
So how do we do that? How do we listen empathetically, practically speaking?
Well, the basics are important.
Right.
Undivided attention, put the phone away, make eye contact, lean in slightly, nod, show you're engaged physically.
Right, the nonverbals again?
But beyond that, it's managing the internal noise, our own biases, assumptions, that constant urge to interrupt.
Toward.
It is. Techniques like summarizing what they said, so what I'm hearing you say is, or reflecting their feelings, it sounds like you're feeling really frustrated. These show you're truly trying to understand.
It confirms you're on the same page.
Exactly. Ultimately, when you listen like that, with your heart and mind, people feel seen, they feel valued, they feel safe. And that's where real connection starts. #3. Building and mending relationships.
You know, that idea of safety reminds me of a project I managed once. Really challenging. Great team, very skilled, diverse.
Yeah.
But something was off. It felt fragmented.
Lack of cohesion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I realized the core issue was a lack of mutual trust. And trust, well, it's not something you can just demand or declare.
No, it has to be earned, built.
Brick by brick, as you said earlier. And sometimes it feels painful. As the manager, I started by deliberately sharing some of my own project struggles, times I'd messed up, felt unsure.
That feels vulnerable. Risky, even.
It did. Totally counterintuitive. But the goal was to signal that honesty wasn't just, loud. It was modeled. That it was okay not to have all the answers.
Leading by example.
Right. And slowly, tentatively at first, others started opening up too. Sharing professional hurdles, sometimes even small personal things. The barriers started coming down. It took genuine, consistent effort, not just talk.
That's a powerful story about vulnerability building trust. So let's break it down. What are those practical strategies we can use to build that trust?
Well, active listening is huge in a team setting. Making sure everyone feels heard, maybe specifically addressing concerns raised in meetings. It shows their input matters.
Validation.
Yes. Then there's consistency and reliability. Simply doing what you say you'll do. Meeting deadlines, being punctual. It sounds basic, but it's fundamental for showing you're dependable.
True. Actions speak louder.
They really do. And communicating transparently, respectfully, even when delivering difficult feedback.
That's a tricky one.
It is. I remember giving feedback to someone who was underperforming. I focused on specific behaviors, the impact they had, and approached it with empathy, asking for their perspective too. It turned a potentially defensive situation into a constructive one.
So focusing on the issue, not the person.
Precisely. And finally, demonstrating empathy beyond just the work tasks. Checking in, asking how people are really doing. It shows you value them as whole people.
That makes a huge difference. Switching gears slightly, but still related to relationships. Boundaries. I personally struggled with this for years.
Oh, me too. The yes syndrome.
Exactly. Saying yes to everything, feeling overwhelmed, resentful. It took me ages to grasp that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's actually essential for balance, for your own well-being, and, ironically, for the health of the relationship.
It defines the space, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you end and the other person begins, it fosters respect.
But it can feel scary to set them.
It really can. That fear of disappointing someone or causing conflict. But what's interesting is that communicating boundaries clearly and assertively often builds understanding rather than creating distance.
Oh, so...
I remember the first time I had to set a real limit with a close friend. My heart was pounding. But I focused on explaining my need, not blaming them. I need some quiet time on weeknights to recharge, rather than, you call too much.
Focusing on your experience.
Exactly. And I saw understanding, even relief in their eyes. It wasn't a rejection of them. It was a statement of my own needs. And equally important is respecting their boundaries.
Right. It's a two-way street.
Absolutely. I learned this with a colleague who needed focused, uninterrupted time for coding. Honoring that wasn't an inconvenience. It actually built trust and made our collaboration smoother when we did connect.
That makes sense. I've found a little trick helpful, the pause and consider method. Before automatically saying yes, or even before asking something of someone else, just take a beat. Ask yourself, does this respect my limits? Does it respect theirs? That tiny pause can head off a lot of future strain.
That's a great practical tip. And inevitably, even with boundaries, conflict happens. Disagreements arise.
It's part of life.
It is. And the key to handling it with compassion is, well, it sounds simple, but it's incredibly hard in the moment. Stay calm. Stay open-minded.
Don't get defensive immediately.
Right. It's so easy to get sucked into the emotion, the need to be right. But if you can just take a breath, step back mentally, and commit to listening first, it changes everything.
Can you give an example?
Sure. I once said something that unintentionally really hurt a colleague's feelings. My first instinct was pure defense. That's not what I meant.
Yeah, the justification reflex.
Exactly. But I managed to pause, take a breath, and just say, I can see I've upset you. Can you tell me more about how that felt?
That must have been tough.
It was. But hearing her perspective, really understanding the impact, it allowed me to offer a sincere apology that came from understanding, not just obligation. And it rebuilt respect between us.
So practically speaking, what helps in those moments?
Active listening, again, is crucial. Full attention. Show you're tracking with nods or phrases like, okay, I understand, or that makes sense. Empathy is key.
And the I statements.
Absolutely vital. I feel hurt when, instead of you always. It shifts from accusation to sharing your experience. It invites dialogue, not a fight.
Makes sense. But what about when things really break down, like a major communication rupture where trust feels completely gone?
Navigating that. It can feel like trying to find your way out of a maze in total darkness. I've been there.
It feels impossible sometimes.
It can. The crucial thing to grasp is that trust isn't usually lost in one big explosion, and it's definitely not rebuilt in a single grand gesture. It's a slow, often painful process.
So where do you even start?
The first step, often the hardest, is acknowledging the damage. Both sides need to recognize the hurt that's been caused, even if they see the situation differently. That shared acknowledgement is the fragile ground you start rebuilding on.
Okay.
Then you work on small, achievable steps. Transparency becomes non-negotiable. Sharing feelings honestly, even the difficult ones, starts letting some light into that dark maze.
So rebuilding relies on that transparency, honesty, and, I guess, accountability.
Yes, absolutely. Both people need to take ownership of their part in the breakdown without using it as a weapon, and really committing to listening without interrupting, without planning your defense.
That takes discipline.
It really does. And effective communication techniques become your tools. Timing is important. Choosing calm moments to talk. Reflective listening, paraphrasing back what you heard, is incredibly powerful to ensure understanding.
Making sure you actually got it right.
Exactly. And those I statements, again, I feel ignored when my calls aren't returned, feels very different and is much more constructive than you always ignore me. It's about rebuilding connection, one careful conversation at a time.
And often, this process leads to apologies and forgiveness.
Critical pieces. I remember seeing a friend grapple with apologizing after making a really hurtful joke. A quick sorry just felt empty.
Yeah, sometimes sorry isn't enough.
Right. A sincere apology means really owning the mistake, trying to genuinely understand and connect with the other person's pain, saying something like, I can see how much my words hurt you, and I truly regret causing that pain.
It requires empathy, vulnerability.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is how seeking and offering forgiveness can be so liberating. It doesn't erase the past, but it clears the emotional debris, rebuilding trust and creating space to move forward.
It's healing for both sides, potentially.
Often, yes. And interestingly, the ability to forgive others often starts with self-compassion. Learning to forgive ourselves for our own mistakes, acknowledging our own imperfections, that can open us up to offering genuine forgiveness to others. ####VIV. Communication in specific contexts and for personal growth.
Okay, let's zoom in on some specific areas. Romantic relationships. They can feel like a communication minefield sometimes, can't they?
Definitely an intricate maze.
I used to think if the love was there, the communication would just happen, but my partner and I would have these long talks that felt like we were speaking different languages, we were talking at each other, not with each other.
Very common dynamic. Simply talking isn't the same as effective communication.
So what helps navigate that maze?
Well, some couples find scheduling specific talk times really helpful. Dedicated time, no phones, no distractions. It signals the conversation is important.
Intentional space.
Exactly. And active listening is paramount, but it's especially tough when emotions are high. The key is often resisting the urge to jump in with solutions.
Right, just listen first.
Yes, and validate their feelings. Even a simple, wow, I hear how frustrating that must be for you, can make a huge difference before you offer any suggestions.
Acknowledging the feeling.
Precisely. And guess what else is crucial here?
Let me guess. I statements.
You got it. I feel unheard when my concerns get brushed off is worlds away from you never listen. It keeps the focus on your experience, reducing defensiveness.
This applies so broadly, even in the workplace, right? Managing conflict there.
Absolutely.
I remember having ongoing disagreements with a colleague. Things were getting tense, affecting the team. My instinct was to argue my points more forcefully.
Defend your position.
Yeah. But instead, I consciously shifted to focusing on understanding their perspective first, really listening. That, combined with using I statements like, I feel concerned about meeting the deadline when this step is delayed, instead of blaming. It didn't just fix the issue.
It changed the relationship.
It really did. We built a better working relationship, more respect.
That's a fantastic example. And it highlights how crucial it is to foster a positive environment at work, creating psychological safety, where people feel okay expressing concerns or admitting mistakes.
How do you do that?
Well, take that example of a team member who was always late. Instead of public criticism, a manager could have a private chat, starting with empathy. Hey, I've noticed you've been running late. Is everything okay? How can we support you? Often there's an underlying issue.
Like workload or personal challenges.
Exactly. Addressing it collaboratively builds trust. Promoting teamwork through shared platforms or activities helps too. And fundamentally, it's about mutual respect, actively listening to diverse views, giving constructive, not destructive, feedback.
That respect piece is key. And sometimes at work, or even in personal life, you need to be persuasive to bring people around to your idea.
The art of persuasion.
What's the secret there?
Again, listening first is surprisingly powerful. When people feel genuinely heard and understood, they become far more open to considering your viewpoint.
Lowers their defenses.
Precisely. Then it's about framing. Instead of just stating facts, we need to adopt this new software. Appeal to their interests or values. Imagine how much time this new software could save us all each week.
Connecting it to their benefit.
Yes. Logical arguments, data, evidence, those are important. They build credibility. But don't underestimate emotion.
Storytelling.
Exactly. Sharing a relevant personal story or painting a picture of the positive future you envision that can create an empathetic connection that pure logic can't achieve. It helps bridge the gap.
Makes sense. Now we have to talk about digital communication. It's unavoidable.
And definitely a double-edged sword. Amazing for connection across distances, right?
Right.
But also a breeding ground for misunderstandings.
Oh, yeah. That text message read in the wrong tone.
Or that slightly sarcastic comment on social media that blows up because the context is lost. Clarity and empathy become even more critical when you lose the nonverbal cues. You have to be more intentional.
So, navigating social media effectively, any tips?
Setting boundaries is key. How much time you spend, what you engage with. Curating your feed for positivity helps. Being mindful of your own voice, is it authentic? And engaging responsibly. Think before you post. Verify info. Remember, your digital footprint is pretty permanent.
Good advice. And email. Still a workplace staple. How do we do that well?
Email etiquette is an art. Clarity is paramount. Have a clear subject line, get straight to the point, structure it logically. Tone is crucial. Reread it to check how it might sound. Is it professional, friendly, appropriate for the recipient?
I once sent an email that sounded way too casual to a senior person. Awkward.
It happens. Always tailor the tone.
Yeah.
And basic etiquette. Use names, proofread carefully, respond promptly. It shows respect.
And technology isn't all bad for communication, right?
Sure.
It can enhance it.
Absolutely. Look at video conferencing, Zoom, Skype, Teams. It brings back some of that nonverbal richness, bridging geographical gaps.
Makes global teams feel closer.
Definitely. And asynchronous tools like Slack or Teams can actually improve productivity if used well, allowing focused work alongside easy information sharing. Even things like virtual whiteboards, murals, they allow remote teams to brainstorm collaboratively, inclusively. Everyone contributes in real time.
That's true. Okay, last area, personal development. How does communication fuel our own growth? Like with goal setting?
Great point. Just articulating a goal, saying it out loud or writing it down makes it feel more real, more actionable.
Takes it out of your head.
Exactly. And sharing that goal with someone you trust, that creates support, but also accountability. You're more likely to stick with it.
How can communication help with the clarity of goals?
By forcing you to be specific. Instead of, I want to be healthier, effective communication requires something like, I will exercise for 30 minutes 3 times this week. It's concrete.
Yeah.
And using positive language helps motivation, framing it as, I am becoming fitter versus I need to lose weight.
That reframing is powerful. What about self-confidence? How does communication build that?
It starts internally, often. Reframing negative self-talk. Catching yourself saying, I can't do this, and consciously replacing it with, I am prepared for this challenge, or I can learn how to do this.
Positive affirmation.
Yes. And externally, practicing assertive communication, expressing your needs and opinions clearly and respectfully directly builds self-worth. It counters self-doubt each time you do it.
So affirmations aren't just woo-woo, they actually work in communication.
They can be incredibly powerful. They help reshape your mindset, which influences how you communicate and how others perceive you. They reinforce positive beliefs about yourself. Integrating them daily, maybe a morning mantra, writing them down, visualizing success can make a real difference over time.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it feels incredibly clear, doesn't it? Effective communication isn't just some optional soft skill. It's, well, it's everything.
It really is foundational.
It's a lifelong practice, essential for our relationships, our success, even how we understand ourselves. We've touched on empathy, clarity, the power of listening.
The spoken and the unspoken.
Exactly. Integrating these things, consciously bringing empathy and clarity and genuine connection into our interactions every day. The value is just immense.
It truly is. And perhaps a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder.
Okay.
Consider this. How might the simple yet actually quite profound act of truly seeing someone looking beyond just their words, trying to sense their intentions, their feelings, picking up on those unspoken cues, how might that consciously change every single interaction you have from this point forward?
That's a powerful question to sit with. Thank you for your support and for listening.